Aloha. You're watching Ericom Security by Cradlepoint. I'm Peter, your host for the Ericom Security by Cradlepoint demo series. This is when we bring in the smart SEs to show us how things are done. Now, about a week ago, my good buddy Jeff, how's it going, Jeff, by the way?
Good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm good. So my good buddy Jeff posted on LinkedIn about a week ago this URL category analyzer thing. And I asked him, like, so what's the story? And he said, well, I got a story about migration, consolidation, automation, and programmability. And you were even talking about infrastructure as a service. So what do we got going here, Jeff? It looks pretty darn cool. And it also seems like it's a nice integration between Ericom and Cradlepoint.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a quick high level. I have a couple visual slides just to give some people some eye candy. But I was walking into a couple customer meetings recently, and a lot of people already have existing policies.
Yep.
Maybe they have us and they have just overly complex policies. In my particular customer meeting, they were coming from the Cradlepoint web filter product on the Cradlepoint routers. And from there, you can import domains, and you can manage your domains that way via CSV file. So someone said, hey, I got a whole bunch of domains. Do I need to have all those domains as policies in the Ericom side of things? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me analyze the domains, because what we have is categories. And maybe now's a good time to pop this up and switch over to the share. Let me know when you see it, Peter.
Yep, we just added you to the stage.
Awesome. So I should recap. Jeff Giroux, I'm a senior sales engineer on the Ericom side of things. And repeating the use cases again, the main one was policy migration. So Cradlepoint web filter, what we could do is take some of those CSV files. We can take it as a bulk import into our API endpoint, and then run it through our analyzer. And that way we can get an output of domains and things like that. But that's just one use case. Say you have too many policies, you can run it through that as well and do consolidation, because maybe you have 100 rules, but maybe 50% of them match a known bad category. So you can now consolidate that down into one rule and then split out maybe the remaining ones. So maybe you're left with, say, 20 rules instead of 100. Amplify that by the number of potential rules customers might have out there. Some are in the thousands for some of their policies. Not that I've seen on the Ericom side. We try to keep it very administratively tight for the user. And we can do that because we have all the different granularity and categories. Right. The third use case I want to mention is just automation, infrastructure as code. So the first thing I'm going to show you is related to the URL analyzer endpoint. And here on this screen, you can see that you can go into the tenant UI and simply paste a domain. In this case, I'm pasting something that might even be a phishing link URL, right? I want to test it against my policy, and it's Netflix with 2 X's with a .me. Normal user might click on that, but I'm just making sure, and I know based on our analyzer that it's a bad site. It's marked as malware. So I can go make my policies according to this output. So again, let's go back to the customer use case. They had thousands of domains, and I don't want them as an SE, as my customer, to manage all of that stuff. Junk in, junk out. So if we can clean that up for them, that would be awesome. So I ended up creating just a simple repository up on GitHub using a Python script, and it imports, or it takes an import file of all the domains the customer gave to me. I just have some samples here, example.com, gambling.com. It runs through a Python script that I can quickly demo and show you. And what that's doing is logging into the Ericom cloud via API tokens securely, running through a different couple of Python functions. So you'll see get jot token. It's going to then analyze the URLs with that URL text file, and then, of course, log you out. When you run this, there's some requirements in the guide, and those are listed there, tenant ID. You need to make sure you have an API key, of course. And then it outputs a pretty cool CSV file. Now, this iteration of my good enough example code was just purely to help the customer identify domains. And the next thing they asked was, hey, can we take that and actually make that a policy automated. So I'll pause there, Peter, in case you have any questions, because I might have to hop over to GitHub and just show you guys some things. But while I'm doing that, do you have any questions?
So it really kind of helps in terms, I mean, obviously no manual input, you know, from the olden days of looking at a list and having to key in all the domains. So the you know, being able to act quickly, get things up and running quickly, no mistakes from fat fingers, and the usual kind of issues you have with manual entry, particularly of large lists.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm running through a safe domain here. I think it's safe. I don't know. Well, let's find out against my policy. Example.com. So I don't have a bulk import within the UI, but that's okay because I have an API endpoint. And then with the API endpoint, I can just cycle things. So I'm going to switch over here and hopefully you guys put your Python coding hats on. And this is the general GitHub repo here where the example I just showed you with the slide deck. I take a nice URL text file. This could be any number of domains that you guys have. You pull this repo down, of course, and you run it through per instructions. But I want to run through the Python code real quick because even though we don't have the bulk import within the GUI, and really all I care about in the GUI for the JSON response is this category right here. So to clean that up, how can we get that? That's where I turn this into the Python script, right? So we run it through this function here. That's the API endpoint that we reference in the Ericom cloud. And the output, of course, is to take that and it gives us a nice output CSV file. Let me hop over to that because I have this open right now. And I'll just show you an example of running it. I've already stored my keys and everything in there. So I'm going to run this. And you'll see that it's just going through that text file that I pasted before line by line. It's basically saying, hey, I'm analyzing it, and then I'm done. And now when we go over to the output file, you can see that it identified the site. Google.com is a search engine, CNN is news, and Secure iCar, this particular URL is a high risk. So now I know when I go make my policies, or maybe I'm consolidating, maybe 100 lines showed up as high risk, and now I can make one policy for high risk. And go right into the GUI, hit plus, do a category, high risk, and deny it. And when I save it, maybe 100 lines were high risk category, but now I just reduced my policy. I only have one line now, reducing, negating all of those policies coming in.
So basically, so you're kind of taking a look at all of the domains that potentially are listed as high risk. And with the script, you're able to basically consolidate all those into a category. And that category becomes your single line versus the 100 lines of all the domains that you got to kind of flip through.
Exactly. Now I keep mentioning the next iteration. This code itself was just a good enough kind of sample to say, hey, can we take that list of domains and get it out? But then I also had another challenge from a customer that wanted a CIPA-based compliant policy. And if you're not familiar with that, that's school-related, protecting children, internet surfing, keeping bad things out. So what we're doing is I go read the CIPA compliant requirements off the internet. And there's nothing too granular in there in terms of what categories you have to block, but it's very specific to keeping children and web surfing safe. And then you have to have a filtering tool. So those are all in there. I left the links in there so you guys can go read it. But this script itself is kind of like an upgrade to the previous script. So the previous one did analyzing URLs. This one actually is a different use case, but it takes the same concept. It'll take an import file. I'll show you that here. So all of these categories are the things that I want to put into the API endpoint and then dictate the access. In this case, I'm going to make a policy with all of these categories and deny them. And if you recall, if we go back to my tenant right up over here, I don't have any of that stuff. So I have to do all that manually right now, which isn't a problem. I can easily go into here, pick category, and I can start checking multiple boxes. I just have to find them, right? What is the CIPA one? Or let's get out of that. I can read through my CIPA compliant GitHub code. I can download it. I can follow the instructions, make sure that the compliance is according to what my customer requirements are per the US guidelines. Make sure you're following those. And then you're going to clone it and of course run the script. So I'm going to run this real quick for you because I think this is cool. Let's go to this one here, and I already got my tenant and API saved. So of course I'm referencing again my CIPA compliant category list. So this is what we just showed on GitHub, just a textual vision of it per category, and then the action. So here we go. So here what we're doing is just going through my tenant. Python is making an API endpoint call with my token, successfully authenticating, which it did in the first phase, and then running through in a loop, line by line, all those categories. And the 204 response is basically the response coming back from the endpoint saying that your policy has been created. So now if we hop back over here, let's update the page. And now look at all those policies we have, Peter. I didn't have to do anything. Now, one more thing before you chime in. If this was an auditing situation and I wanted to prove to auditors who's making changes to the policy, who's updating categories, if you were keeping this and maintaining it infrastructure as code where your commits and edits had to happen here, and then maybe the next iteration is a webhook policy or something else, right? So now I come in here as a user, I delete or add a line, that forces a commit. GitHub now makes a change automatically with the service token to the Ericom API endpoint, automatically updating your policy. So that's what I mean by the infrastructure as code point. I don't have that part integrated, but kind of pretend, right? So analyze, we got CIPA compliant, and then that showed the use case of actually making the policy. And then we can get into webhooks and automating further policies. So that's kind of some of the examples I was running through with customer requirements lately.
So with the policy and the imports, it also then automatically assigns like allow or block or isolate too, so you don't have to go through each one to determine what kind of action to take.
Yeah, completely. Like in this case, the CIPA compliant CSV I have, if we go back and look at that, the action column or access is all deny. But if I pick one of these other access mechanisms like inspect, so that's SSL man in the middle. Isolate is our famous remote browser isolation where we're rendering everything in the cloud, preventing phishing attacks, malware, and all that stuff. So if you wanted some of those settings, it's just a matter of making sure your policy is updated accordingly in the CSV file. So it's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Wow. So you definitely automate, having to literally create policies. And I mean, if the most simple term, migrate. So if a customer is migrating from a web filtering tool, or they have a CSV or an XLS of a list of domains, they can basically take that and bulk import, and not only just bulk import, but then categorize. So we got, what did I say? Automate, migrate. So consolidate, we're literally consolidating however many lines of domains down into one line of category. You're definitely doing it with programmability for sure. Make sure you folks check out the GitHub. And,
yeah, you guys don't want to do stuff manually. That's never fun.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so did the customer appreciate the how you went about doing this?
We did a sample test. They gave me 90 domains up front in the big CSV file. So if anyone's working with CP web filter right now, that import file is domain, 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 all in one thing. So I had to do a Python script to kind of split that out to be line by line, but I took it and the 90 domains turned into, I think, 15 policies when I ran it in my lab. So yeah, I wouldn't want to manage that. That was just one file of many for this particular customer because they separate them out by however, what their policies are. And each file is a different domain. So I found that, I don't know, they appreciated it. No one wants to manage multiple things when they're redundant.
Yeah, and when you start, the hundreds, thousands of customers across hundreds, thousands of domains, and everybody's got their own list. This really turns it into a simple process. Really cool.
Yeah.
So we can learn more. Well, one, we put up the GitHub locations. We'll include those in the description for sure. I definitely want to, Jeff. So if you point up to the top right, we want to point out the other one. There we go. The new Ericom Security by Cradlepoint logo. If you'd like to learn more about any of Ericom Security by Cradlepoint solutions, you can obviously visit us at ericom.com and cradlepoint.com. Great job today, Jeff. I know you were a little so for those of you watching, Jeff and I go way back. We used to work at a company together prior to this. And I don't know if you noticed, but I opened with Aloha, which a previous boss was like, no, we don't want to do it anymore. Aloha's back, baby. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
always enjoy learning from you, and this stuff is pretty cool. So if you like demos like this, please hit that like button, nail that subscribe button, and always come back for more. Thanks a lot, Jeff. You want to give them away for my good buddy, Jeff. I'm Peter, and we're with Ericom Security by Cradlepoint. Thanks for watching.